Friends, with the new school year, we begin anew on our journey through the scriptures. So we're back to the beginning, into the book of Genesis, and by Christmas we'll get to the Gospels for Jesus' birth, and then by Easter we'll get to the end of the Gospels with Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection, and then we move into the rest of the New Testament. But here we are, beginning of the school year, beginning of the Bible, the book of Genesis, and a person that many of you have heard of, Abram, who also later gets his name changed by God to Abraham. And as we start out at the beginning, what we do every year as we make our journey through the scriptures is we're reminded of the big story, God's big plan, how God has been at work in the world from the beginning and continuing always, that God is at work in our lives. And one of the things that I want to clarify from the beginning and have us thinking about is that there's a big difference here between these two things. On one hand, sometimes we'll hear people say everything happens for a reason. And you'll often hear me say, I don't believe that. Instead, what I like to say is, I believe that God sees everything from beginning to end. God knows it all. And God is at work in our lives in powerful ways, calling, inviting us to be a part of what God is up to. But if you say everything happens for a reason, you're implying that God somehow controls us, right? If everything happens for a reason, then the sinfulness in my life must be God's plan for me? I don't think so. All right? The idea here is that we sin. We're human beings. We sometimes muck things up in all sorts of ways, and we're not always good at listening to God in our lives. And God comes into the midst of all of that, and he says, hey, I've got some things for you. I've got some love and grace for you. I've got some guidance for you. I have direction for your life. God speaks into our own sinfulness and our own lives that we're living and says, hey, listen, something bigger going on here. Come and be part of this bigger story. Okay? You track me there? Now, I also say when we think about situations that our communities have been through the last couple of months with the flooding, I say we have a God who specializes in resurrection, a God who can come into any situation and can bring new life. And so that's what we look to. We don't say, well, God made these floods happen to teach us a lesson. No, floods happen. God is there to walk with us through that and to give us guidance and protection and help us to find our way to the other side. And at some point we will feel like we're finally to the other side. Some of us might feel like, well, we're already there, and some are looking at a long time till we get to the other side. But God is on that journey with us, helping us to find new life. Okay? So what I think God does is God looks at the big picture of what's happening, and God knows from beginning to end, and God calls to each one of us and says, hey, here's what's going on. Here's how I want you to be a part of this plan. And you and I, we have the free will to either say, okay, God, or I like my own path a little better right now. Okay, and some of us like to learn the hard way more than others, and so we experience all those things, right? But what we see today in today's lesson is a great example of God speaking into someone's life with a bigger plan in mind and calling them to go on a difficult journey to ultimately be a part of God's bigger plan. And what I want us to be aware of is that this text that we'll look at today, this text actually speaks to ultimately Jesus coming and then the mission Jesus gives to us to carry out. So we're going to talk about that. But it also speaks about you and I in our everyday life, how God is tapping on our shoulder or whispering in our ear or nudging us along to say, hey, there's this thing I have in mind for you over here. I want you to go do this thing. And the question for us is, first of all, are we listening to God speaking? And second of all, are we willing to trust God with whatever that may be? Knowing that often we don't know what all is entailed there. It's asking us to step out of our comfort zone or do something risky or something unpopular or whatever that is. Okay? So that's background. So we move into Genesis 12 today in the story of Abram. And timeline-wise, this is thousands of years ago. We don't know the exact time that Abram lived, but it's prior to 1000 BC, closer to 2000 BC. So we're talking 3,500, maybe 4,000 years ago. That's a long time ago, isn't it? We're talking a long time ago. We're talking at a completely different time in human history, a different way of people viewing the world, and really this is before you have a lot of large nation states, okay? And so people are more grouped in clans and tribes. And it's in many ways sort of a dangerous time because in order for one tribe or clan, they often have to compete with each other for resources and for land and all of those things, okay? So there's a lot going on here. And into Abram's life comes God. And so let's start at verse 1 in chapter 12. The Lord had said to Abram, "Leave your native country, your relatives and your father's family, and go to the land that I will show you. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you and make you famous, and you will be a blessing to others. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who treat you with contempt. All the families on earth will be blessed through you." Okay, pause. There's a lot to unfold here. So God comes to Abram and makes this incredible promise. First, what does he ask Abram to do? Jonah? Leave. Leave his relatives, his homeland where he's grown up. Leave and go somewhere else. Okay? Kind of a big ask. But it's a really big ask if you consider the context here, right? This isn't a time where you can pull up Google and say, okay, Google Maps, how do I get there, right? We're not jumping in a car or on a bus or in an airplane to take a trip. This isn't a time where you can get out your encyclopedia or your world map and find your way, right? This is at a scary time in the world to go anywhere. And so what God is asking Abram to do is leave everything he knows and to go somewhere that he knows nothing about. Oh, and by the way, there's an unknown journey in between. And that journey can be filled with lots of things. Honestly, this is a risky thing because, first of all, traveling through wilderness, who knows what you're going to come across from in the wilderness, but especially who knows what people, groups you're going to encounter on the way. Those groups may not be friendly to you coming through where they are. In fact, they may see you as a prime candidate for easy pickings. So this isn't a simple, hey, why don't you go take a trip, over to Europe and set up a new life. This is a whole different kind of thing that God is asking Abram to do. And so our first question is, why will Abram do it? Well, we're going to find out, yes, he will. So let's first of all, though, digest these promises that God made. Because there's some really important pieces here. So kind of tick them off. We go down the list starting in verse 2. God says, "I will make you into a great nation." Now, why is that important? Is he talking about turning Abraham's people into the world's superpower? No. What's this promise mean to be a great nation in terms of for Abraham? This is a promise about the future. This is to say, Abram, I'm going to be not only with you, but I'm going to be with your descendants. Okay? Your family will grow to a tribe, to a clan, to a nation. Do you catch? He's talking to one man who at this time doesn't even have any children, and he's saying, I'm going to turn you into a great nation. In other words, I've got plans for you and your descendants for generations. Okay, this is a generational promise of God saying, I'm going to protect you, and you and your family will survive and live on. Okay, that's a really big deal. And in a time in the world where the size of your clan, of your tribe matters, this is really important because the more population you have, the more safety you have, right? You are less likely to be attacked if you are a large nation. You have better ways to protect yourself and so on. So this is a really important promise about the future. Then God says, I will bless you and make you famous. Now, when we hear the word famous, it means one thing for us in our context. We hear famous and we think Hollywood, probably, right? We think Ritz and glitter and Neiman Lights. What does God mean here by this promise about him being famous? What he means is people are going to be telling your story. Your story is a story that people are going to be telling. And in fact, here we are, 3,500, 4,000 years later, telling this story. So he doesn't mean you're going to be rich and famous in our sense of it, but he means that the story of what you and I are going to do together is going to be a story that people are going to want to share. Cool. But he says, bless you and make you famous. And then he says, you will be a blessing to others. you will be a blessing to others. Now, this is where God's big picture plan takes a really important turn. And this begins a big challenge for you and I as we think about how God works in our lives and the purpose of that and what that's all about. He says, I will bless you and make you famous, and you will be a blessing to others. So in other words, what I'm going to do in your life, Abraham, it's ultimately not about you. It's about how I'm going to work through you to be a blessing. And I want to submit to you that is, in fact, the purpose in each of our lives. It's not about what God's going to do for us, but rather it's about how does God want to work through us to impact the world, to be a blessing to others. That's actually the purpose of our lives. Okay? Track with me on that. This whole faith thing isn't about, I hope God will give me what I need. No, God will give you what you need. The purpose here is, how does God want to work through me to make an impact, be a blessing, so that God's will is done in the world? Now, in a moment, at the end of these promises, he takes it a whole step further. So, I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you and make you famous. You will be a blessing to others. And then he says, I will bless those who bless you and curse those who treat you with contempt. I think what he's saying here is those who recognize that I am at work in your life and want to do life with you and be a part of what we are up to together, they will share in this blessing. And those who want nothing to do with you and who say, this isn't for me, what you are up to, I'm not a part of, well, they won't be sharing in that blessing. Okay? But it's this promise from God saying, I'm with you. I'm with you. And there will be people who want to get on board, and there will be people who won't, but I'm with you. And then this last promise, which friends, is revolutionary for the way that people thought at this time. He says, all the families on earth will be blessed through you. All the families on earth will be blessed through you. Well, what's the deal about that? Okay, as people who live in tribes and clans, their primary way of thinking about religion and faith in the world is that we've got our God, and our God is for us, and our God will help us defeat everyone else, or vice versa. Okay, their primary way of thinking about religion and the reason you serve a God and worship a God is because you want the most powerful God to be on your side so that you win. Okay, I mean, that's basically the idea. I mean, these people are fighting for survival all the time. So their fundamental thinking is, I need to keep God happy, so God will be on my side so we win, or so we don't lose, right? But the idea then was always, as nation states as they developed and they went against each other, the idea always was, well, whose God is the stronger God? The assumption always was, we have our God, you have your own God, and our God is only for us and us alone. What's really a game changer here is that God is saying to Abram, not only will I make you a great nation and protect you and help your descendants, but actually through you, all the families of the earth will be blessed. Do you see how that's a radical way of thinking for these people? So this story that is read by the Israelite people from generation to generation over the millennia is meant to remind them that what God is doing in them and through them is for everyone. Now, ultimately, this passage comes to fulfillment in the person of who? Jesus Christ. Jesus is a descendant of Abraham and came to die for who? Everyone, for all families of the earth. Interesting, isn't it? Thousands of years later, that part of the blessing comes true as Jesus comes to die for all of us. The important thing for us to remember, as I hinted at earlier, is so this promise actually really becomes a mission. And that's Jesus' mission as Jesus comes to this earth. And then as Jesus is crucified, rises again, and then goes to heaven, he hands this mission off to his followers, which includes you and I, the church. That our purpose of the church is to help be a part of God's plan that all the families of the earth would be blessed. Okay? Let me connect the dots there. When Jesus came, he said, I come that they may have life and have it abundantly. Jay, you need to stop, okay? You either need to sit here or go back to your mom, okay? No, that's not an option. You can go up to your mom. Thank you. So Jesus came and he said, I've come that they might have abundant life. That's why I came, that you might have life and abundantly. Okay, what does he mean by that? Well, what he means is, I want people to be connected to me, to know me, and to be able to live in that grace and mercy and share it. I mean, that's the essence of what he's talking about. This idea that we are blessed to be a blessing, that Jesus says to you and I've got a plan in this world, and I want you to be a part of it. So, back to the beginning, I started the sermon today with everything happens for a reason versus God sees all of time and invites us to be a part of the plan. Okay, do you see what's going on here? God has this preferred future for us and for the world, but it's optional for us to join in on that or not. And there are days where we join in on it really well, and there's days where we contribute to the opposite of that, right? But God is always inviting us to this big picture plan so that you and I see that we are blessed. Why? Not just for our own sake, but we are actually blessed for the purpose of God working through us to be a blessing. Okay, well, let's see how else this plays out here as we think about these big picture ideas of what God is up to. So God comes to Abram. He asks him to do this crazy thing, to leave everything he knows, to go to the complete unknown and take this scary journey through the wilderness, family at risk, to get to the new land. So verse 4, and what's kind of funny in a sense is in this scripture, the journey happens like that. It's like, oh, there they are. We know this would have taken a while, but listen to here. So Abraham departed as the Lord had instructed, and Lot went with him. Abraham, Lot's his nephew. Abram was 75 years old when he left Haran. He took his wife Sarah, his nephew Lot, and all his wealth, his livestock, and all the people he had taken into his household at Haran, and he headed for the land of Canaan. When they arrived in Canaan, Abram traveled through the land as far as Shechem. There he set up camp beside the oak of Moreh. At that time, the area was inhabited by the Canaanites. Okay, so just like that, Abraham arrived in the land of Canaan. This was a long journey. We gloss over it quickly, but we need to understand that he took a huge risk, took his family on this long journey. If you're a person who likes the map, likes to know where we're at in the world, and if you like maps and things, you imagine modern day Iran, okay? Abraham, we believe, started in Iran, and he would have followed the Euphrates River northwest, well, from your direction, northwest, until he got into what's modern day Syria. We've heard on the news the last couple of years about Aleppo. He would have made it to Aleppo, and then he would have gone south, probably through Damascus, all right, and then ultimately modern day Israel. So that journey would have taken them around the Arabian desert, okay? This is wilderness, folks, and they would have had to stay close to the Euphrates to have access to water and anything green and fresh. But that also means that it makes it that much more dangerous because there's a narrow strip of land along the river, and of course, anybody who wants to take advantage of you knows that. So, right, scary journey. He goes on this journey, does what God asked him to do. And then what I want you to pay attention to is what he does when he gets there. And my question for you in this is, as you go through journeys in your own life, as you go through those ups and downs, sometimes those journeys are very dark ones. As you go through this journey, and as God travels with you, when you get to the other side, what's your response to God? And let's see what Abram does here. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, I will give this land to your descendants. And Abram built an altar there and dedicated it to the Lord who had appeared to him. And after that, Abram traveled south, set up camp in the hill country with Bethel to the west and Ai to the east. There he built another altar and dedicated it to the Lord, and he worshiped the Lord. Then Abram continued traveling south by stages toward the Negev. So what did Abram do twice once he got to where God called him? He gave thanks and worshiped, and what did he do before he did that? He built altars. So Abram arrives in the land, he builds an altar, dedicates it to the Lord, keeps traveling, builds another altar, dedicates it to the Lord, and worships. Why do you think he did that? What would be the point for him to build an altar? Essentially, we're talking about a pile of rocks. Why would he do that? What's the whole point, and what's he marking? What's he commemorating? What's he doing? So first and foremost, he's honoring God. This altar here, dedicated to the Lord, says, God did this. God brought me here. God kept God's promises. God kept me safe. This pile of rocks, this altar, is to mark what God has done. It's sort of a way of sticking a stake in the ground and saying, hey, everybody, look what God has done. Right? It's a way of honoring God and noting that God has done this. Absolutely. Stefan? Exactly. Well, that's another story. You're absolutely right. So it's claiming territory. It's sticking a flag saying, this territory has been given to us or to me by God. Absolutely, it's claiming, but it's claiming it for God. It's not raising the family flag. Built an altar for God, claiming that God has made this promise. You're absolutely right. Now, ultimately, in the history of Israel develops as a nation, there's a whole lot around what happens with the Canaanites and how we understand that whole thing. And you're right. That's the flip side of the story is, well, what about the Canaanites who are already there? It's a fair question. Fair question. But he builds this altar to really say this is part of what God's given to us. Now, understand this, folks. So this story is first of all going to be an oral story passed down for generations, ultimately written down and passed on for generations. But the Israelites hearing the story, they know these places. And in fact, these altars will exist for a very long period of time, and people will say, that's the place. That's the place where Abram built this altar when God brought him to this land. It's a place of marking something. It's a memorial, a place to remember something that's happened so that generations can pass this information on and know the good news about what God has promised them and done for them. So really important. So, Brett, you said it to begin with. You said he gave thanks and he worshiped. And at the end of the day, that's what I want us to notice. That as Abram built these altars and sort of planted the stake in the ground, planted the flag, look what God has done. God has given us this. He's also saying, thank you, Lord. And he's worshiping God. He's giving God the credit. And he's taking the time to acknowledge that it's God who brought him through this, that it's God's promises that mark his life, that are the meaning of all of this. He's taking time to stop and worship. And that's what I want to challenge us on as we go through times in our lives, as God brings us through different times. When we come out the other side, do we stop and say, thank you, God? And I'm going to build this altar, whatever that looks like for you, to mark what you have done. And I'm going to acknowledge that you are a faithful God who has brought me through this. You, in fact, did walk with me all the way. Powerful, isn't it? It's powerful. One of the things that strikes me about Abram's story is his obedience. The fact that God asks him to do this thing that is filled with unknowns, and Abram does it. And I think for me, that's part of this bigger picture of how God works in our lives. This bigger picture plan that God's up to, this bigger picture plan that God invites you and I on. God taps us on the shoulder or whispers in our ear and says, hey, I've got something for you. I want you to do this thing. And sometimes that ask is a great big ask. Sometimes it's a little tiny ask, but often those asks push us out of our comfort zone. Often those asks challenge us to do things that we wouldn't often do on our own, that we maybe aren't inclined to. Maybe it's volunteering in a ministry. Maybe it is repairing a broken relationship. Maybe it's giving something that we treasure and giving it to someone who, for some reason or another, needs it more than we do. Lots of different things. I don't think for many of us, God is saying, hey, I want you to move to a foreign land. That's usually not the ask for us. But it is some kind of unknown, risky thing that God pushes us on. And the question is, are we willing to trust God with that? To know that God's bigger picture plan, which we can't see, can be trusted. That if we take this step with God, if we take this journey, that God is going to use that in some way that we don't see right now, might not make sense to us, but that God is up to something that's bigger than who we are. So God made this promise to Abram. And he makes this journey. And remember, God said, I will make you into a great nation. Okay, read the chapters that follow. We get to chapter 15. And Abram's kind of having it out with God because it's 25 years later. And he and Sarah still don't have a child. Now think about that for a moment. God made this promise to him. Abram said, okay, I'm going to make this journey. And 25 years later, he's waiting. Now, I don't know about you, but I tend to get impatient with God more than a few days. Right? I mean, to think in those kinds of terms and scope of time, it's a different perspective, isn't it? And it's saying that God is up to more here than I know, but I'm going to trust God with the process. Once again, folks, I don't believe that everything happens for a reason, but I believe that whatever we're in, God comes to us in the midst of that, and God brings new life. So our job as God's people is say, okay, God, what are you up to? How do you want to use me right now? What are you calling me to do? Our job is to listen and then trust God with it. Okay, God, I'll go where you call. I'll do what you call me or ask me to do, and I'm going to trust that you're up to something here more than I'm aware of. Blessed to be a blessing. So long story short, this promise to Abram that all families on the earth would be blessed, it comes to fruition in Jesus, but this mission comes to you and I today as the church. Okay? We've seen this in a very real way as we have responded to what's been happening in our communities with these floods. People have been devastated, and I have seen you responding in incredible ways, sometimes with your hands, sometimes with your hearts, sometimes with your pocketbooks, but responding out of God's love. Jane mentioned in the announcements that we asked you to invite people to Family Faith Night, and you did. Folks, real quick history, 12 years ago, we were two congregations. We were Our Savior's in Black Earth, St. John's in Mazo. And do you know how many children we had in Sunday school 12 years ago? It's not 51 or 15, that's 6. 6. We have about 140 registered for Family Faith Night this year. Holy smokes. But I tell you that because God is up to things beyond us. When we started Family Faith Night, that wasn't on my radar. I was hoping that we could have something for the families of this congregation and trusting that God would do something with it. Now we're faced with questions like, well, where do we fit everyone? It's a great problem to have, but God's work in the midst of that. And what I see happening in our community is that God is using this congregation to be a blessing in really important ways. And so we had people Wednesday night coming through our doors for the first time ever, people we'd never met before, who were invited by friends and came. We are a blessing in this community in very tangible ways, whether it's flood response or whether it's helping to raise our children in the faith. We are doing God's work. And you are a part of that. We do this together. It's pretty awesome to be blessed to be a blessing. So, how's God tapping on your shoulder or whispering in your ear? How's God giving you a little nudge or a little shove and saying, hey, I got something for you? Let's be open and aware of that. Now, this might be a time right now where God just wants you to focus on what you're focusing on. But our job is to be listening and ready to say, okay, God, I'll trust you. Let's pray. Oh, gracious God, we thank you that no matter what comes our way, we can trust that you are with us. We thank you, Lord, that when things go awry, we can trust that you walk with us always, and that you bring new life, even from what looks like death. We thank you, Lord, that we can trust you in all things, and we thank you for inviting us to be a part of what you are up to in this world. We thank you for blessing us so that we can be a blessing, and we ask, Lord, that you help us to have eyes to see what you see, to have hearts that break for what your heart breaks for, that we are ready and willing to respond as you call us. We pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.